my fellow heathens. This is your host, the world's most highly educated stand-up comedian, Dr. Jerry Jaffe. Come on into the heathen pool and have a dip. We're all heathening around and you can join us. This is my podcast. It is documenting my journey into the wild and weird world of religious satire. This is Season 2, and Season 2 I've been on a mission to expand some of the topics covered to other critical thinking skills, things happening in the world, and different guests and interview guests, and some Q&A episodes and some live streaming and a YouTube channel. So we're really trying to expand our outreach and build a larger community. So thank you so much for coming out to today's episode. Today's episode is right in line with that mission statement for Season 2, because I'm so excited to have on as our guest today from the Center for Inquiry, with a research fellow, Ben Radford, who's an expert on investigating many odd and or paranormal incidents and situations and urban legends. And he is one of their experts on UFOs. And we're recording this episode in the middle of July 2021. And anyone who's been paying attention the past couple of weeks has seen a spike in interest in UFOs. So we're going to get into that here. I'm going to set this up, tee it up, and then I'll get over to our interview. Helping me out with this interview is a very good friend of mine, guest co-host, comedian out of Columbus, Jesse Pimpinella. Hey, Jesse, thank you so much. So I'm going to bring Jesse on in a couple minutes, and then me and Jesse will do our interview with Mr. Ben Radford. Before we get into that, I'll do a couple of announcements here. You know, we are trying to expand our social media reach. We added a YouTube channel. All episodes of the Comical Heathen are available for free on the Comical Heathen YouTube channel, so check that out. We do also have a donate button. This is a completely ad-free labor of love. So if you have the opportunity to make a small donation, look for a link in the description of the show notes. Also, you know, this is for fun and for outreach. So please, share. If you tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends, math tells me that that's 7 people who will know about the show. So, be part of the 7. And one particular announcement, one part of the Comical Heathen program is I've been developing a live show, which was in development in 2019 and then got put on hold due to the very serious circumstances of the coronavirus pandemic. Well, that is starting to gear up again. I did a performance here in the Cleveland area near where I live in May, and that performance was recorded to be part of the virtual Kansas City Fringe Festival. So, no matter where you are in the world, if you're interested, you can see the video of this performance. It's with the Kansas City Fringe. I'll put a link down in the description. Tickets are on sale now through the whole month of July. And then the festival has like a portal where you can see the videos of all of the shows. And so that portal will be open from July 18th to August 1st. Consider checking that out. It is $10 tickets. The festival shares 75% of the ticket revenue with the artists in question, so they are running the festival to support the artists. And I will point out, there's about 60 different performing arts groups, including dance, theater, and so on. So consider getting a festival pass, and that'll allow you to see multiple shows at a lower rate. So anyway, that's something you might consider checking out. The Comical Heathen Live Show is part of the Kansas City Fringe Virtual Festival. And I'm putting together some dates, but I'll announce those both on future episodes of the podcast as well as, on the website and Facebook and so on. So watch out for other dates as the year unfolds for the Comical Heathen Live Show. So where did this spike in UFO interest, sightings, activities, news media chatter, where did this come from? The 12 people who listen to this podcast know that often when I'm about to kick off a monologue or a rant, I start with a news article that I respond to. And there's actually a theme that goes all the way back to Season 1, Episode 1, is that journalists treat religious news stories and supernatural news stories and conspiracy theory news stories. Often they treat it as fluff news, so it doesn't really get like hard-hitting journalism or isn't taken very seriously. And I've shown many examples of that over the couple of years of this podcast. And that's actually is almost like a meta topic for this UFO coverage. I'm going to put a couple things together here. So the epicenter of all of this is actually June 25th. What happened on June 25th is that the U.S. government, particularly the Department of National Intelligence, issued what it was called an unclassified report on what the Department of Defense calls UAPs, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. And this was a much anticipated report. UFO enthusiasts thought it was going to be like the tell-all moment. And it was really, when June 25th came about, the report was a big nothing. And there's not really anything in it. At most, it's like a description of the fact that sometimes pilots see things and they don't know what those things are. And really, it needs more investigation. It's not anything more sensational than that. There's no alien autopsies. There's no secret alien technology. And, this got landed two different ways. The skeptical community in general, I would say, said, yeah, that's probably what we expected them to say. That is what UFOs are. Objects that are up in the sky, flying, levitating, or otherwise, and they're unidentified. It's not synonymous with little green men from outer space. On the other hand, the UFO enthusiasts were excited, here's some unclassified stuff, here's a report, here's the government taking us seriously. So it's almost again, those two separate realities that get talked about so much in recent times. On top of that, it got covered by the news, right? So every new CNN and NBC and Fox and whatever covered the reports. And that pushed it into the headlines and pushed it into people's imaginations. I'm sure that'll go over just fine, right? Nothing would go wrong with the media doing their fluffy coverage. I was looking up articles because there were a bunch of them. So I'll include a couple in the links down below, including a link to the report itself, if you want to take a look at it. So it's publicly available now. But I don't have a article. But I do have an article that stood out to me because it really captures, if I could say one thing about this topic, and that was an article that went back to 2008. Because I collect a lot of these articles, and this is the one that I globbed onto to make this point. There's an article from 2008 about an emergency call in Wales. And in Wales, the emergency number is 999. In the U.S., it's 911. Other countries have different 3-digit codes, but it was an emergency call. And an emergency call was an unnamed man. I don't know why anyone felt like they needed to protect this man's anonymity. But this man called, again, 999 in Wales, and the call's recorded. And this is what he called, emergency for. Here's the man. I'm not going to try to do a Welsh accent. It's a beautiful accent. It's also, I'm not even sure Welsh people do a Welsh accent. I think they're making it up as they go along. But here's what he said. I just need to inform you that across the mountain there's a bright stationary object. The control room agent said, right? The caller says, if you've got time, you should go find out what it is. It's been there for at least half an hour, and it's still there. And the control room asks him, is it actually on the mountain or is it in the sky? And the caller says, oh, it's in the air. Okay, we'll send someone to check it out. A few minutes later, the control room was on the call with an officer that they sent to the scene. And the control room asked the officer, hey, did anyone have a look at this object in the sky? The officer says, yes, it's the moon. Over. The moon. The moon. International Man of Science, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and other magazines and newspapers that do lists of common causes of UFO sightings. And the moon is on these lists, people. Now, we're going to get into this, the moon factor being a common UFO object with Ben. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I want to do for a second is channel this guy. Who was this guy? And they tell us nothing about this guy. I mean, you might even be assuming that this guy's got to be drunk or out of his mind or has issues of some kind. I'm not assuming any of that. I'm assuming let's say, relatively normal, sober dude. And this normal, sober dude, what did he do? He looked up in the sky and he saw something. And he did not know what it was. And his thought, his reaction, his gut reaction, his brain trying to apprehend and comprehend and discern a mystery just screamed at him, what the fuck is that? And that is very human. That is universal. We have all seen just stuff that for a second our brain couldn't figure out, or for a second or for a lifetime. What the fuck is that? And I want to use that moving forward. Traditionally, we say UFO, unidentified flying object. And we know what that should mean. Words mean things. All three of those words mean something. This new government report uses UAP. I don't know why government, Washington, D.C., alphabet soup, but it's similar. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. Those words still mean things, even if they are tainted with a kind of bureaucratese. But I don't want to play alphabet soup. I want to play human nature. I want to play the emotional animal. And I want to call these U-WTF-Os. Unidentified, what the fuck is that object? That's what it is. Because I feel like if we can have that gut punch of the feeling behind it, of the mental shock, of the mystery, then we also can not jump to little green men from outer space. It's perfectly natural to go, what the fuck is that? Oh my God, what is that? When Ben and I are talking with Jesse, we each share a WTF moment that we had. Me and Ben have UFO stories to share, and Jesse has a Bigfoot story to share. And that's what I think we need in this conversation, not only to make it more human, like this caller had a human experience. A kind of easy to mock and ridiculous human experience. And his experience is actually wasteful of public resources, right? Because the 999 caller had to field that call, and a police officer had to go out and investigate that call. So that's actually like taxpayer money, as well as resources that should be spent on real emergencies. And so that there are real world effects for these moments and for these conversations. I mean, imagine the writing of this report, the June 25th report. People in the government had to spend taxpayer money, taxpayer time, taxpayer resources to generate this report. And you know what? Reports are good, actually. I don't mind that this report exists, but we should just be aware that there are real-world, practical effects on the community, on the government, on the military, and so on. The other benefit or change that I'm hoping by calling these unidentified what the fuck is that objects, U-WTF-Os, trademark, Jerry C. Jaffe, the Comical Heathen, is to drive home we're not being visited by transcendental aliens with advanced technology that's so freaky-deaky freakadelic. It's not alien technology. It's as simple as weird angles or surprising vistas or unexpected combinations of lights and shadows can cause us to go, what the fuck is that? So with that mission in mind and that attitude motivating me, let us turn our attention towards my actual interview here. Now, of course, Jesse, my co-host, is a good old friend of mine. We've done tons of comedy shows together, and I'm glad to have him on this podcast any chance I get. Ben is my new friend. I reached out to CFI to ask if someone there would come on our podcast and talk UFOs with us, and they hooked me up with Ben, so thank you so much. People at CFI as well. Paul Fidalgo, their communications director, put me in contact with Ben. Thank you, Paul. While Ben and I were talking before we started recording our actual interview and conversation, it turned out that we have like a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon moment. We have a friend who has been on this podcast previously a couple times, and Ben has been on his podcast. And I'm talking about the hilarious comedian out in L.A., Critical and Thinking, Ian Harris. So it was a real 2 degrees of separation, right? We just both know him, and we just randomly turned out to know him. And Ben just randomly brought him up. I mean, I love Ian, but I wasn't thinking about Ian until Ben brought him up. Then Jesse said that he knows Ian completely separate from both of us because Jesse's down in Columbus and Ian performs in Columbus. He'll come out and do the Funny Bone there. So we all three, independent of each other, knew Ian Harris. And Ian Harris, if you get into this world of skepticism / comedy, is a kind of god to us. Ian has a joke. He's like a god to us. No one believes in him. Besides being a witty turn of phrase, though, he is well known. He's well connected. He knows everybody. So I got Ian on the phone and dug a rant out of him. I've had some rants during season 2 from friends who phoned in. So since Ian was like an unofficial mascot of this episode. Before throwing to the interview, let's hear what Ian wants to rant about. Cue my old-timey telephone.
Hey everybody, what's up? It's comedian Ian Harris here. I wanted to get this off my chest because I want to say, I'm not sure if other people think this way or if it's just me. And I have this weird thing when I meet religious people or when I meet people who are like, conspiracy theorists and this sort of stuff. I have this immediate, and I know they're not all dumb. I know that. I know there's some smart people that get tricked into stuff, and it's a weird bias, and I try to be a nice person. I'm really not trying to be a mean person, but I automatically laugh out loud in my head, if that makes sense. Like, I want to laugh out loud. In my head, I'm going, if someone says, that people say stuff like, well, God this, or, well, in the afterlife, or well, if you just shake a chicken bone and eat some echinacea, you're I want to go, bah, like laugh in the face. Like, does everybody else want to do that? Like, sometimes I do. Sometimes I laugh uncontrollably, and people are like, wow, what a dick. But it seems so absurd to me. You somehow can tie your shoes and you can drive a car and you manage to get the fork into your mouth without poking your eye out. Yet you believe in a magical sky daddy, or you believe that Donald Trump won the election and it's all rigged and he's going to take over as the 19th president of Jeebus Topia on March 4th, or whatever the hell you think. These goofy, you think that chemtrails and they all the world's airlines, they put the stuff in my bird is going crazy. He doesn't even like it. And spraying, and then you get into the groundwater and you turn into a zombie, and it's like, oh, the vaccine. You take the vaccine, and then Bill Gates. How do you not laugh at these people? How do you not laugh in their faces? I don't want to be mean. I know that these people are nice people. I'm sure some of them are great, uncles and aunts and friends and sisters and brothers and whatever. It's because if it's something you don't believe, if I said to you, if you were just like a Christian, or maybe you're a QAnon person, and I said, yeah, next week I'm getting a new unicorn. They're delivering the unicorn, and it's pink. It's really great. And its hair doesn't have hair. Its mane is actually cotton candy. So I eat cotton candy and sometimes it can fly. You would be like, looking for a way out. And and you might have a hard time containing yourself. That's how I feel when you're like, well, God has a plan. Yeah, great plan. Look around you. So I wonder, people hit me up. I'm on social media. Ian Harris. It's Comedioker. Is at Comedioker. My podcast, Critical Thinking with Ty Barnett and Ian Harris. Come on. I'd love to know what you think about that. Do you just want to laugh at people when they say ridiculous stuff? And how do you stop yourself from doing it? And are you justified? Because again, if my pink cotton candy unicorn thing, if I really believe that, you should laugh at me. You should laugh at me.
And that was Ian getting something off his mind. Thank you so much, Ian Harris. I was glad I was able to include that clip and make you an official member of this podcast episode, not just the mascot. All right, so we're here to talk about UFOs. We're here to talk about UFOs with Ben Radford. Well, this is your host, Dr. Jerry Jaffe, back, and it is my pleasure to bring on today's episode's special guest co-host, one of my best comedy buddies, comedian coming to us from Columbus, Ohio, Jesse Pimpinella. Jesse, how are you?
How's everyone doing? I'm excited for this, man. I feel like this is the only time I can be smart, but then I get corrected by smarter people. I wasn't just wrong. I had a learning moment. And that's the difference.
Well, I'm glad we can hear. We'll slap some sense into you before this episode's over.
There you go.
Jesse, have you ever seen a UFO?
No, I haven't seen a UFO. I had other sightings. Like, I think I saw Bigfoot one time, but I don't want to get into that.
You never looked up at the sky and said, what the fuck is that object? A U-WTF-O? Come on.
I listen, UAP... I remember it was UFO. Then it's like UAP now. I'm changing it now. If you're going to keep changing it, I'm going to change it. Worldly aerial phenomenon. WAP. All right, we're going to call it that now. Okay, that's a WAP. Yes. I was like, oh, that's a WAP. That's a WAP. That's what I'm going to do from now on. But I love when people listen to this and that song's no longer popular, and everybody's like, "Is he doing an Italian slur? What's going on?"
Yes, that's what it sounds like, actually. So I want everyone to know Jesse is Italian. So that's a self-deprecating humor right there. Don't bother writing in. He's doing it to himself, not to anyone else.
So regarding aliens, I mean, for me, I've never seen anything up in the sky, and maybe I'm not looking because I'm afraid of what I will find. And if aliens do exist, or there is technology beyond us, I should say, because all we know is there's possibly some type of floating thing out there. But let's just stick with the aliens real quick. If there is aliens, why in the hell would they want to come here? Why?
Right. Exactly.
They're way more advanced than us.
For the moose tracks. For the moose tracks, Jesse. There's somewhere else you're going to get moose tracks in this galaxy.
You remember those messing with Sasquatch beef jerky commercials?
Yes.
I feel like we're Sasquatch, and they're the kids just messing with us.
Well, there's an old sci-fi saw that any technology sufficiently advanced would appear to be magic. So in a way, if you look at something and think that it's technology, it's already not magical anymore. Like, you already kind of know what it is. So it's almost like a self-defeating paradox in a sense. Because if it was super powerful aliens who could transcend dimensions, it would be magic to us, not what's that weird ship or what's that weird light, if you see what I mean.
But that's what I mean. They might just be trying to screw with us. You know what I mean?
Right, because they're messing. Yeah, because we're the...
They're looking at us like a bunch of simpletons. Like, one of them's flying. They're going light speed. We can't see them. And you have the one guy that's like doing donuts in our sky to mess with us. Yeah. We're like freaking out.
Well, Jesse, on June 25th, 2021, our U.S. government issued a report and started some brouhaha. We're recording this in mid-July for reference to anyone who is involved. First of all, whenever the government or politician makes a statement about UFOs, there's more UFO sightings after. So there has been a surge in interest in sightings since June 25th. And I thought, I'm trying to slap some sense into you, Jesse, but I thought it would be good for our conversation to bring on a true bona fide expert to slap sense into all of us.
I agree.
So I contacted the CFI. I want to tell you real quick before I get directly to the guest. What I found online, because I follow the CFI pretty regularly, is that they had released a press release through their communications director giving guidance on media on how to talk about UFOs sort of skeptically and intelligently. And when I found that press release, I was motivated. Like, I'm going to share the link to that press release so everybody can see it, because there's some really good, brain nuggets in there for how to think about UFOs. But it motivated me to reach out to CFI to see if we could get an expert on our podcast here. And they sent me one of their resident research fellows, author of a dozen books, expert on UFOs as well as conspiracy theories and other relevant topics, folklorist from New Mexico. Let me welcome to the show, Ben Radford. Hey, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with a couple of goofballs who don't really know what we're talking about. So
not a clue.
We're here for you to straighten us out, and maybe if the 12 people who listen to this podcast can get something out of it as well.
The story of my life.
Well, speaking of the story of your life, if anyone is listening who has never heard of Ben Radford, tell us just one or two sentences. What do you do, Ben?
Yeah, well, I investigate weird things from a science-based perspective, sort of bringing in folklore, critical thinking, things like that. So that's what we do at the Center for Inquiry, is trying to examine any number of weird things, including, of course, UFOs, psychics, alternative medicine, Bigfoot, ghosts, take your pick, but through a science-based perspective. So some might call us skeptics, which is fine, but it's really sort of more like, hey, man, where's the evidence? Where's the beef, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing about skeptics. Everybody comes at it, skeptics, like sometimes like, oh, you're just trying to be raining on our parade. And it's like, no, they want evidence because they would love for this to be real too. I mean, I'm like, I want this. You know what I mean? Like, I want this.
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's, Bigfoot, I wrote a book on chupacabras, and I would love to have found these things. I mean, So, I'm not this sort of naysaying, dismissive debunker of things. I mean, sometimes I end up debunking things, but it's not because I hate them or I don't want them to be true. It's because ain't good evidence, guys.
It's to follow the evidence. So I teach at the college. I sometimes teach intro to philosophy classes and critical thinking skills classes. And I try to just introduce young adults to the idea that being skeptical means being interested in evidence.
Exactly.
It's not being a denier, like a improperly named climate skeptic. Those people are not philosophical skeptics. They are deniers.
Exactly.
What drew you to this, Ben? What started you down the path of investigating odd claims?
Well, like most kids, young teens, whatever else, I was interested in weird things because they're weird, right? Who isn't interested in weird things? They're inherently interesting. And, so when I was a teenager, I was growing up and I was watching, In Search of and science fiction films and books about allegedly true things, Bermuda Triangle, Bigfoot. I remember very clearly I would go to a local used bookstore and I'd get my allowance money. I'd come home with armloads of books. I just probably, if someone saw me from a distance, be like, what is that mound of shambling books doing? And I would go and I would just read these things during the summertime, like, this is so cool. There's psychics and there's the Loch Ness monster. And I would read all these. And then after a while, I sort of realized that there wasn't much actual investigation. It was mostly like, it is said that. And, an anonymous person saw something. I'm like, who is this anonymous person? How do we tell that is? And so I began by, being fascinated by the world and all the mysteries, and I still am. But as I sort of grew up, I got a degree in psychology and I got more interested in actual investigations. And so that was when I sort of dawned on me that I could actually turn this into some semblance of a career. And I've somehow managed to do that.
Well, congratulations on living the dream.
Absolutely. And because the things I investigate, again, we can talk about UFOs, but I did a book on lake monsters and crop circles, whatever it is. I'm happy to go in the field and investigate. So I'm not some ivory tower. Well, that can't be true, I say. I'm like, let's go find out, man. Let's go check it out.
I'm more of the ivory tower guy because I'm like to be comfortable. I need air conditioning to be on while I'm doing research.
Wow, little delicate flower here, man.
Yeah, even when I wrote an article about the Creation Museum, I did go and do field work, but only because the museum was air conditioned.
I'm the type where I'm like the intern. You pay $5 an hour to touch the space rock. Let's see what happens to him.
Jesse, eat this.
Eat this. All right.
We'll see where this conversation goes in a few minutes, but I definitely invited you on to talk about the recent media attention to UFOs, which I think we can circle the calendar June 25th as the date of the release of this report. What were you thinking on June 24th, knowing that this supposed report was about to be released? What were you anticipating?
Well, there's a couple things here. I've been doing this type of work for almost 24, 25 years now. And I say that not to brag, or if it is indeed a brag, but instead to point out that I have some perspective. That is, I have repeatedly seen people claiming that the next UFO revelation is coming next year. And, the Bigfoot is going to be proven any day now. I heard that in 1978. I heard that in 1982. I heard that in 98 and so on. And so there's this sort of this vanishing horizon of evidence. And this occurs in UFOs, Bigfoot, ghost. I mean, take your pick. There's these the believers, the cadre of believers who are just sure. They're just so certain that the proof is just around the corner. Just you wait. The truth is going to come out about UFOs and so on. And so I've heard this before. So let me just take a seat. So, I had expected that it was actually going to be more or less as it was, which is the nature of these UFO sightings or UAP sightings or PUA or where the hell they are, is that they're inherently ambiguous, right? I mean, if the videos were clear, then we would know what they are.
They would be identified instead of unidentified.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I interject real quick? Because you would be able to answer this question. Why is it that we always have shitty video? Like, I'm just thinking like an iPhone could take all these gorgeous pictures. I could see the pores on people's faces. And up there, it's like, it looks like they have the rabbit ear TV. Like, I think we got the picture.
Right. Hold on.
What's going on?
There's a couple things that are going on here. And again, this applies, I mean, we're talking about UFOs right now, but it also applies to Bigfoot. I mean, the fact is that, to this day, the best alleged evidence for Bigfoot was shot in 1967 during the Johnson administration. This is the famous Patterson-Gimlin film, right? So to this day, you talk to Bigfoot believers, they're like, well, if you look at this film, like, dude, come on, man, this is, and it's the same thing with UFOs. And so to answer your question, the reason why these videos and these photos are so shitty is because they have to be, because there's this sort of Goldilocks zone in which whatever it is, whether it's allegedly photo or video of a ghost, of UFO, Bigfoot, whatever it is, if it's too clear, then as Jerry was saying, we know what it is. It's identified. It's it's this, it's that, whatever else. On the other hand, if it's too fuzzy, if it's too garbagey, if there's nothing there, then we don't pay attention to it, because it has to be in this sort of this sort of Goldilocks zone of, it has to be weird enough to be noticed, but not so weird that it's like it's identifiable. So that's part of the answer.
Yeah, there's a part of our brain that when things are fuzzy tries to identify it. That's why people see faces and wood and things like that. So these fuzzy images, our brain almost subconsciously is working to figure out what it is, but it's unidentified. So it makes these random associations.
Yeah, I mean,
in a way, or wish fulfilling. Maybe not random's not the right word. Like, if you see.
Yeah, it's a combination of, it's what in psychology we call pareidolia. So it's why we see faces like clouds and Homer Simpson in beer stains and all these things. So that's part of what's going on. But with UFOs, you have the added barrier of there being lots and lots of things in the night sky. Right? There's any number of things. I mean, look at it this way. Like if you're on a lake, if you're in the woods, there's only a handful of things that if you see something big and fuzzy in the distance, it could be Jesse, taking a leak. Who knows where it is? But run
away, people.
Do not approach.
I ran away when something like this happened.
Well, but this is the thing, right? There's a bit of a difference, because in the sky, number one, if you don't know the distance, you don't know the size. And so, is that glowing object, is it 10 feet away and tiny? Is it 50 miles away and huge? It's very, very difficult, because there's nothing to compare it to. And plus you've got satellites, you've got comets, you've got balloons. There's all sorts of things in the sky that could be mistaken for something at least temporarily unexplained.
Neil deGrasse Tyson has pointed out, and I shared an article with Jesse, and I'm sure this will totally be on your radar, Ben, that one of the most commonly misidentified what the fuck is that objects is the moon.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That and Venus.
When you say that out loud, it sounds patently absurd. But it's just, as you say, especially in a big city like New York, where the sky is broken up and there's clouds and reflections, people just look up and don't know what they're seeing. Like, naturally, if there's anything odd about it, it's a what the fuck moment.
Yeah, and and one thing that's really remarkable about the recent UFO videos, because there's as you guys know, there's been a handful of their videos that were obtained, and the origin is the U.S. Navy. So there's about a half dozen videos. There's different kinds. I won't go into all of them.
Sure.
If people are interested, there's a really good explanation. If people go to Metabunk, META Bunk, I think it's .org. Mick West has an excellent breakdown, frame by frame. He does Metabunk is really the go-to source.
Well, I'll put Metabunk in the show notes for anyone who wants to follow up.
Yeah, but the point I want to make is that when you look at these videos, and I've watched all of them many times, God help me, is that one thing that jumps out at you is that people say, well, do you think it's fake? I'm like, did you see it? Do you see how boring and mundane this shit is? Why would you bother to fake this? This is nothing. This is not interesting. It's this thing in the distance. It's the videos themselves are supremely, astonishingly mundane. There's nothing there. The only reason that it's sort of built up as a mystery is that you have these mystery mongers who say, well, yes, but the pilot who saw this said that it moved at this angle, this and that, and they don't account for camera movement and things like that. So the videos themselves are really remarkably unremarkable. It's the alleged context that in which they occurred, that sort of makes it a mystery.
Well, that's where as a professional folklorist, we find that a lot of these, maybe we'll say urban legends, come with folklore. Like there's stories, and Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds. He was telling a story, And then there was a boom period of people seeing Martians, but no one was seeing Martians before that. And if we go back to the medieval era, and I'm going to make a vast generalization, so you can correct me, or feel free to email me, anyone who wants to correct me, comicalheathen@gmail.com. People would see saints, right? There were saint sightings in the medieval period. And I'm sure there are still saint sightings today here and there, but there were no alien sightings because the stories that were important to those cultures was of being visited by saints, not of being visited by Martians.
I wish I could correct you on this, but unfortunately, you're pretty much right.
Yes.
But it wasn't just saints. There were actually reports of flying saints.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I did some research on that. There were sightings of. I think this is cool, right? You're like, you're hanging around. It's like 1820 in some village in Hamburg, and you're like, oh, there's a flying saint there. This is pre-flying nun time, guy. Anyway, what is that? Is that Father O'Brien? Oh, it sure is.
Look, it's a bird. It's a plane. It's St. Patrick's.
Hey, I do want to say just a couple things about the report, and if you, Jesse or Ben, want to add in, I do want to say this report itself is now available online.
Yeah.
The whole document is only 9 pages long, and that includes a cover page and 2 appendix pages. So the report is only 6 pages, and
it's double spaced.
Oh yeah, large
fonts, really big fonts.
Yes,
that's why some nice little clip art there. From like 1995 clip art. It's awesome.
And it was done 3 minutes before deadline. College student stuff, really.
So people can look this report up if you just want to look at it for yourself, and it's sufficiently vague. It basically says we need to do more research. That's like.
Sure.
There's been unexplained, as they call them, UAPs, and we need more research. That's the whole report in 5 words.
Yeah, and that's about what I expected. I mean, look, the fact is that if people say is there such a thing as UFOs or UAPs, the answer is yes, absolutely. All that means is unidentified flying object or aerial phenomena. So if all you mean by that is, are there things in the skies that ordinary people and even sometimes pilots and others don't recognize? Of course there is. Why wouldn't there be? All that means is that something isn't immediately identified under those conditions, from that angle, from that distance, and so on. So of course UFOs exist. Yeah, that's not the question. The question is, are they some sort of extraterrestrial craft coming from other galaxies and doing things on video that are impossible by our current physics? And the answer is no. If you take a close look at them, they're eminently explainable.
Which is why I'm trying to rebrand the whole phenomenon, not UAPs, but U-WTF-Os, because I think that captures the average person looking up in the sky going, whoa, what's that? What the fuck is that? I don't know what that is. I mean, that's humans being humans.
Start a petition. I'll sign it.
Yeah, thank you. We're good. You, me, Jesse, and our mutual friend Ian Harris is going to make this happen.
Only if we all come together and storm Area 51 while we're at it. Right? We need answers.
A small detail I don't want to lose track of. It might be the comedian in me, but this document comes from the Department of Intelligence. I looked it up and I wrote down the head of the department, which is Avril Haines, is the current head of the department that issued this report. I only point that out because that does sound like the kind of name an alien would give themselves if they came to Earth and didn't know how to pick a name. Yes. Kind of like Ford Prefect in the Hitchhiker's Guide. Avril Haines sounds like a made-up name for an alien alias.
Sort of just saw the back of somebody's underwear. What's your name? Haynes.
And Avril Laine was playing in the background. Suddenly it's Avril Haines. That's a human sounding name, isn't it?
They essentially just did what Back to the Future did. Like, what's your name? Calvin Klein.
It's all good, man. What do
Ben,
do?
One other thing here. I'm also myself old enough to remember a period, let's say, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s, where there was a kind of boom of UFO sightings, which are now, let's just say, correlated with the stealth bomber.
Yes.
And maybe some other parallel technology as well. And again, you can comment on that. But the question I want to ask is, do you think a report like this, which is sufficiently ambiguous and is called unclassified, by the way, actually is also intentional from defense? Like, aren't they creating a little bit of confusion around their own projects, or are they not that smart?
No, that's a fair question. I think there's a couple angles to it. I mean, number one is that the Department of Defense has a history of sort of playing with UFO believers and conspiracy folks. You see this, for example, with Area 51. Area 51, it's a real place. It's not fictional. I mean, it's an actual military base, and you occasionally see the Defense Department doesn't spend a lot of time debunking UFO claims because they're like, we got better stuff to do. And furthermore, more to the point, they recognize that no matter what they say, people aren't going to believe it. So even if next week or tomorrow, they released all the information, they literally emptied the vaults and said, here it is. People are going to say, oh, what didn't they show us? Like, well, they can't win. They can't win because no matter what they say, no matter what explanations they put out there, the hardcore believers say, well, that's the cover story, but what's really going on? So that's part of it. And I think that it's fair to say that there, along with the rise of stealth aircraft, is particularly being tested in Nevada and elsewhere, you're going to be seeing people describing weird things in the sky. Right. Again, that isn't inherently strange and mysterious, because the fact is that the U.S. government is known to have and should have, a program for testing aircraft. And furthermore, it's also not a good idea for the U.S. government and the DoD to tell everybody, including Putin, and King Jamil, what's going on. So the defense industry has a legitimate vested interest in keeping some things close to the vest, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're hiding aliens and UFOs. It just means that there's legitimate reasons for not being forthcoming about every last thing.
And there's a kind of ironic element to this element of the story, which is to say the Defense Department and Lockheed and test aircrafts and whatever, is that nothing that they produce defies the laws of physics.
Right.
So even if it's a strange thing, again, that the person on the ground is like, what the fuck is that? That is not synonymous with has defied the known laws of physics.
You're exactly right. And so this is why, again, the context of a lot of these UFOs is that people are claiming, including on 60 Minutes. I mean, there was a 60 Minutes aired a month, 6 weeks ago. And, had this guy, Luis Elizondo, and others who were sort of, and it's getting a lot of play. It got play with Leslie Keane in the New York Times and elsewhere. And so you have otherwise credible journalists who are covering the story, not as critically as I would like them to. But you have people who are doing this, and so it lends legitimacy to it, and that's fine. I mean, if people want to investigate UFOs, go knock yourself out, man. Have fun. I don't have a problem with that. But at some point you're like, when you take a close look at the videos, as McWest and others has done, the things they hang their hats on, right? They say, well, if you look at this video, this object makes a 90-degree turn in a split second, and that defies the laws of physics. Right. Well, it would if the camera hadn't moved. When you stabilize the image, it doesn't do that. So, come on.
Something I noticed when you talk about journalists in a way, not doing a very good job in a way, I think that UFOs are generally like a fluff human interest story, not a hard journalism. And one of the things is, I'm going to say like a professional UFO enthusiast, the authors of books. I don't have anyone in particular in mind. I'm just going to make a generalization. I feel like a professional journalist, if they did background research, would easily uncover contradictory statements. That in one interview, person X might have said this happened, but in another interview used different numbers or different dimensions or different figures. And it's clear that amongst, let's just say some, and I am making a sweeping generalization, the professional UFO enthusiasts, that stuff is just getting made up along the way.
Yeah. And
journalists never fact check that.
They rarely do. I mean, there's been a handful of cases. I mean, there's one off the top of my head is the case of Bob Lazar, who was a guy who emerged in the sort of the wake of the Area 51 stuff. And he claimed to have worked at Area 51, and he had all these first person accounts of, I was there, and I worked there, and I saw alien bodies and all sorts of things. And he was actually interviewed in silhouette by the local news. I think it was in Nevada somewhere in Las Vegas. And he is this big, very dramatic, blah, blah, bum, bum, the lid is being blown off. And then people are like, what's this guy's name? Hold on. So they start digging in, and his story just falls apart like a house of cards.
Excellent.
Just the whole thing. And but to this day, his name is still brought up as if, well, Bob Lazar, like, that was even the believers are like, this guy's full of shit. Like, you don't need to be a skeptic. So like, but still they can find somebody who's gonna put him out there.
Another concept relevant to this, but relevant to other, let's say, urban legends and conspiracy theories. I can't remember if Jesse, in an earlier episode, I might have discussed this with our mutual friend, Dan Brown. In class, another key concept I often introduce is Occam's razor.
Yep.
That, if you're going to say it could be a cloud or it could be an alien spacecraft, or even it could be a military plane or an alien spacecraft, the law of the economy of ideas prefers, until there's better evidence anyway, a more terrestrial explanation.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. It's an important principle in critical thinking and skepticism, right? Basically, the idea is that you shouldn't unnecessarily multiply hypotheses, right? So if you only need two things to be true to explain something for one theory, and you need five things to be true to the other theory, it's not hard and fast. I mean, it's, there are exceptions, but for the most part, that's the best, most parsimonious explanation.
I did have, in my teen years, a kind of UFO experience. Bennett, but did you ever have that what the fuck moment yourself of something in the sky?
I did. In fact, yeah, I remember very, very clearly. I was attending the University of New Mexico. So this would have been 93 or so. And I was commuting from my home where I grew up in Corrales to Albuquerque. And I remember very clearly it was say mid-morning, about 8:30 or 9. And I was parked at a stoplight to get onto the freeway. I looked over to my left over the city of Albuquerque, which with the Sandia Mountains in the background. And I saw a huge glowing white disc. And again, this is 8:30 in the morning, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm facing this way. I look over to my left, and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm just staring at it. I'm thinking, this is going to make the news. And this is before cell phones. I'm thinking Albuquerque is going to be panicked because there must be millions of people seeing this giant glowing disc over the city. I'm seeing it clear as day. It's right there. I'm not making this up. This is not a hallucination. It's fucking right there. As I'm watching this, the light turns green and the car to my left moves forward. And as it moves forward, I notice the glowing disc moves at the exact same rate. And I realized that it was the sun coming over the mountains, hitting the side of the window on the car to my right, being reflected off the inside of my windshield on the driver's side right there. And I swear it looked exact. I mean, if you'd put a gun to my head and said, is that a glowing disc over Albuquerque that's 2 miles wide, I would say, yes, it is. But in that moment, I was my blood was draining. I think my balls shrunk a couple millimeters. I don't know. It was just creepy as hell. And then
never recovered.
But I'm better now. Thanks for asking. But let me tell you, and then the mystery was solved within. I'm like, wow, mind blown. And so this is one reason why, as a skeptic, as an investigator, I'm sympathetic when people tell me I saw Bigfoot, I saw UFO, I saw this, I saw that, because I don't doubt that you saw that, but what you saw may not be what you think you saw.
It's mind-blowing that it seemed to turn out that what you saw was ultimately the sun, only the biggest, brightest object in the sky.
Right.
But again, reflections, perspective, angles, things just can get sort of Picasso really quick. I'm referring to shifting planes that Picasso has in his paintings. Things can get really Picasso really quick. When I was in high school, I had I'm still very good friends, but I had my best friend, my brother from another mother. Our birthdays are 4 days apart, so it was quite a lengthy labor. This was in the mid 80s, so no computer games, no air conditioning. You had to make your own fun with sticks. And we would go in the summer on this nighttime adventures. And again, we weren't like robbing anyone or doing crimes. We would just wander. I'm sure our parents were mortified. One night around midnight, we spotted some weird lights in the sky. I don't think either of us thought they were per se, shall we say, alien technology, but it was like, what the fuck are those lights? And we looked and shrugged, and we went on like hobbits on a journey. We just walked towards those lights, which 2 or 3 hours later, and we're going through fields and cutting between factories, and it's nuts. No one would let their kids do this in the year 2021. And to get to our punchline, as we got sufficiently close, like a block or two away, all it was a car dealership with spotlights in the parking lot.
Wow.
And so from like miles away, there were like weird bands of light and flashing lights, and we didn't know what the fuck it was. And it turned into, an adventure story, again, sort of almost as a folklorist. Let's go on a journey and solve this mystery.
Yeah, and I love that story for a couple reasons. One is that you did something which most people wouldn't do and don't do, which is actually investigate. And one of the biggest reasons why there are unexplained mysteries in the world, and I know this because I've solved many of them, is that people don't put in the time and the effort to investigate. I've investigated dozens and dozens of cases, and I've solved them not because I'm the smartest guy in the round. I'm just the idiot that put in the time and the effort and kept going. And so, it's a truism. All the mysteries out there, oftentimes they're not inherently unexplainable or mysterious. It's that people give up before they find out what the hell it is.
It sort of gives a twist to the old TV show Unsolved Mysteries. If it's just a matter of like, did you go and look?
Right. You would think that'd be the first question they ask. Like, real quick, did you look? No. Okay, we have a pilot. That's like, we got an episode. So here's an interesting thing that happened to me. So I was doing a gig in Salt Forks, right? Salt Forks is known for Bigfoot sightings, right? And my buddy and I, after the show, it's 11 o'clock at night. There was this like trail that's pitch black. You can't see anything. We had cell phone lights. We're filming we're going to find Bigfoot, right? And we had a weird moment. And again, like I said, in that moment, I lived in a world where either Bigfoot existed or two redneck guys had night vision goggles like, let's fuck with the city slicker. One of those two happened. So I'm going to explain what happened. All right, so my friend and I are walking next to each other. My buddy is on this side of me. All of a sudden, a rock hit me in the foot on my right side. He's on my left. My right side came hurling towards me, hit my foot. I look at him, I think he did it. Like maybe he went behind my back and tossed something. Then something hit him, but on his opposite side, his left side. I'm on his right. And at that moment, I went, fuck it. And I ran and I left my buddy to die, theoretically. Good. I didn't yell, let's book it. I just ran and said, fuck it. And then he ran afterwards. And at that point, it was just two of the fattest comedians running up a hill. And whoever was the fattest will be the sacrifice.
And
you did or did not hear banjos?
We went back that night with friends. We're like, trying to debunk what the hell happened. And then I started Googling shit. I was like, okay, because apparently what we did to possibly provoke this sighting is there was on the website, it said, if you take a stick and you hit a tree 3 times, it's like their call sign. I don't know how true that is, but I did it.
I think I know how true it is, but go on.
Yeah,
it's a known fact.
Yes. So for all I know, again, I could have had the hillbillies from Deliverance like, oh, we're going to fuck with them.
You got a pretty mouth there, Jesse.
Jesse, I don't want to frighten you, but I've done a lot of research on this, and that is how raptors hunt.
That sounds legit to me, man.
Yeah.
John Hammond's island was real. Jurassic Park was a thing.
You know what? Let's just move on.
Let's just move on, all right?
Hey, Ben, in your many years of research, besides UFOs, is there something that you've uncovered that you just think is really interesting that maybe people don't know as much about, or that you don't get a chance to talk about that often on other people's podcasts or interviews?
Honestly, there's been so many things. I mean, I did a book on evil clowns, and
yes,
I did a book called Bad Clowns about evil clown sightings, and so there was the whole phantom clown phenomena in 2016, as you may recall.
Yeah, give us a teaser about killer clowns. What was that all about? If you could just say a couple sentences, that better make someone want to go read your book.
The book itself is it's basically a history and cultural history and folkloric history of evil clowns and scary clowns. So not just incompetent clowns, because we all know some, and some people voted for one. But these are just malicious clowns. And so he goes back to, actually goes back to ancient Greece. You have old clowns and Harlequin. Then, of course, you had, killer clowns from outer space and Stephen King and Pennywise and all this, and the Joker, of course. But among the last chapters, I sort of talk about the phantom clowns. And basically, these were alleged clowns that emerged in the 1980s that were said to lurk around and almost kidnap kids. And I mentioned almost because they never actually did it. They were reported as phantom clowns coming up, and so it was this really interesting folkloric study where the adults never saw them. They were sort of schoolyard rumors about people coming out of clowns, and this giant clown with a chainsaw and a machete and a Uzi came out and chased after me, but I threw my book at him, and my chemistry textbook injured him seriously, grievously, and I managed to escape. And like, all right, Jimmy. Anyway, but this is what happened. So there was this whole phantom clown thing, and shortly after my book came out, there was when we had all the clowns. And so you had clowns, in South Carolina and Boston, elsewhere, that were suddenly these evil clowns were appearing on social media, threatening to kill people. There were actually clown lockdowns. There were schools that went into lockdown. Jesse knows. He's probably one of them. And it's just, but the whole thing evaporated. So basically, in a nutshell, it was a combination of a handful of pranks, like, some teenager, probably like you goofuses, who'd be like, I'm going to put on a clown and cruise around a Walmart parking lot, scare the shit out of some pensioner. So you had that, and then you had pensioner is British, of course. I'm throwing that, I don't know why. So then you had the copycats. So people who see other people are like, hey, dude, we should do this, right? So you have these people who are like doing their thing. And then you had these sort of urban legends that were floating around that were sort of based on nothing at all. So these all combined and exploded nationwide. In fact, internationally, there were reports in the UK and Holland and elsewhere. So in a nutshell, that was the clown panic.
But it's so crazy how that spreads like wildfire. As you said, the first wave of people who did, then the copycats, and then it's a fad, and it's so fascinating how this stuff just hooks on to people that they need to do it.
But in that like say cycle that you describe, I don't know, I just want to ask this to be sure for myself. Is it confirmed that there's an early stage where there were pranksters? Like, do we know that for sure, or is that still anecdotal?
No. That's a good question. So here's the thing. So again, the origin of the phantom clowns, that is, clowns that were said to threaten and then sort of vanish. It pretty clearly dates back to the early 80s, 83, 84. Okay. And there were other things going on. For example, there's the Satanic Panic you may be aware of, and this and that. So there are lots of other cultural things going on.
I lived through that too.
Yeah, we were there. So that's the origins, and there was never any proof they existed. As far as we can tell, they were basically imaginary, folkloric, almost mass hysteria figures.
Sure.
When you bring it up to the modern time, when you bring it up to 2016, there we know for a fact there were some people who were doing this. There were people that were arrested for threatening their schools. So there were a handful, I'm going to say maybe a dozen, give or take.
Sure.
People who were, again, teens who put on a clown mask and scared people shitless. And so there were some arrests, but at the same time, there were also hoaxes. There was one woman I was reading about who she said she was late to work at McDonald's. I'm not making this up, at McDonald's, because a clown came out and attacked her on her way to work. Well, she later confessed that she made the whole thing up, but you had this blend of a handful of actual cases where people were dressed as clowns, and then copycats, and then sort of hoaxes, all blended together for this
phenomenon,
this seltzer of silliness,
this moment of cultural history.
Yes,
which is why the aliens, as Jesse pointed out, are not coming.
Yeah, they're like, you know what?
They spotted that. They're still on the killer clown phase. We're not ready. They're not ready for us.
They just look at us like we're just ants. Like, what are you guys doing down there? We're like, you guys are just screwing it up. Like, that's how I view it. get a little bit cooler, we'll contact them. But first, it's just like
We are not a planet of Fonzies, that's for sure.
we're not a planet of fun. It's kind of, I always attribute it to me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, she liked me. She was interested in me in high school, but she did not want to date me in high school because she saw I was an immature loser who was just a prick, and I had to mature before we got together.
I'm going to say that as she matured, she learned to accept your immaturity. I haven't actually seen the evidence of your maturity in that.
Okay, all right, could be that too.
You know,
could be that.
Ben, on every comedy podcast, the comedians always end with shout outs for upcoming gigs or anything they want to plug. So before we finish up, and I will have some thank yous at the end, but let's go around the table. I already mentioned myself in my opening that I have a video up right now that you can see with the Kansas City Fringe Festival of me doing the Comical Heathen live show. So please consider checking that out. There'll be a link in the description. And I'm going to be doing the Comical Heathen live show in August in the Kentucky Fringe live. So look for more information about that in August. And I have other gigs coming up at different comedy clubs. Jesse, what do you got to plug?
Check me out for all my live dates at www.jessepimpinella.com. You can find me on all sorts of social media platforms at Comic Jesse Pimpinella. And also, I want to announce it here, not officially yet, but I'm announcing it right now. My comedy special is in review with a certain channel right now to be released. And I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited. Once I get the official word, trust me, there's not going to be a mountain that I haven't climbed to yodel into. I promise you.
Congratulations.
There's going to be a fad where there's cows shaved on the side. Jesse Pimpinella.
Cow shaving.
Yes, with a date. But right now it's tentatively for July 31st. So keep an eye on my website, everybody. This is big, and I'm very excited about this.
And Ben, I have one more plug before I get to you, and you'll see why when I say it. People who know me and Jesse, or if you're just encountering us for the first time, Jesse and I are part of a comedy team called the Action Comedy Nerd Show, and we do shows at comic book conventions and anime cons. And due to the nightmare past 15 plus months of the pandemic, all of those sorts of shows have been shut down. Well, as the world reawakens, the Action Comedy Nerd Show reawakens, and we actually are booked to appear at the Indiana Comic Con this upcoming October. So look for more information about that. But the Action Comedy Nerd Show is back. So, Ben, what do you got to plug? What do you want people to know about?
Well, unlike Jesse, my probation agreement prohibits cow shaving. However, you can check me out on my podcast called Squaring the Strange. SQARING The Strange. It comes out every couple weeks. I have a couple co-hosts, and I'm also on Facebook and the Twitters and things like that. And actually, this is just recently confirmed. I will be appearing at Dragon Con.
So exciting.
Massive nerd fest. I actually co-founded the Skeptics track there, so I'm looking forward to going back, and it'll be my first post-pandemic thing. So
well, I'm jealous, but you and Jesse, you give me whatever you want, and I'll make sure that links and things are included in the show notes so people can follow up with all of these hints and clues and things to do. So it just remains for me to shout out some thank yous. Of course, I want to thank you, Jesse, for being my guest co-host. And thank you, Ben, for being our guest expert on what the fuck is that objects. And then also, I always make a point to thank the musicians who did our theme music. You can hear Mark Bell playing the famous Skinner organ on the campus of Lake Erie College, playing beautiful Bach music that was remixed by my friend Jeff Geddert, who's also an audio advisor on this podcast. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, if you made it all the way to the end of this episode. Atheismo, bless you. We really appreciate you. Feel free to share, like, email us if you have suggestions, questions, comicalheathen@gmail.com. And otherwise, thank you for listening. And as always, I just want to say, it may be your dogma, but it's my karma. And I'm all about spreading the love.